one little side tour I want to take you on, both because it's fun and because it helps you create better looking programs. Now, we don't use a lot of command line programs these days because we're used to a graphical user interface. We're used to touch screens and icons and clicking and dragging and all of those wonderful things that help speed up our work and make things easier. In the good old days, there's my old man story for the day. In the good old days, when I was a child, everything was command line, just like what we're doing with Python right now. Will we learn later to use buttons and a graphical user interface? Yes, that is one of the bonus assignments. But for most of the class, we're going to keep things really simple and use the command line. However, we still care about the user experience. So a command line user interface doesn't have to look ugly or disorganized. It can look pretty good even sometimes. Okay, so when I have a calculator program, I can do some, not graphics, but I can use the characters to create art. Sometimes people call it ASCII art because ASCII is a type of character and they use those to make art. I can create lines and borders, and I can use different characters to create different patterns and things like that to make things look good. There are also string functions that allow me to center my text without knowing how long the text string is, and that sort of thing. Now, all of this is founded on the idea that when a Python computer or a Python program is running, the way it looks at the screen is something like this. It's a giant grid. Okay? And you can see when I print hello world, this is what Python sees. Each character takes up exactly one space, including the space character. It takes up one box. So hello world takes up exactly the same number as any other word that takes up the same number of characters. There are 80 characters in a standard Python line. 80. So if you want to center something in a line of 80, you have to figure out, you could do the math, you could say how many characters is in the word Bill, B-I-L-L, 4. And if I want it to be in the middle, I would subtract 4 from 80 and divide it by 2, right? And that's how many spaces I would put before and after that. Luckily, Python has some ways to help us out. So ASCII art is really common. You've probably seen something like this in somebody's email signature or online. If you look up ASCII art, A-S-C-I-I, art, you can get all kinds of things like this. Now, should we make this in Python? I don't know. I've seen some students really get into it, and they do like icons and all kinds of things using ASCII art. I don't require that, but if creativity is your thing, I'm not going to limit it either. Far be it from me. What I'm more interested in is that you learn how to do something along the lines of this, where you can create borders and lines. So if I was to express this top line here, it's got hashtags all the way across. Now how many spaces across did I say it was?
80.
80. So if I was to create a formula to draw this line of hashtags, what might it look like? Just make up code. Hashtag times 80. It's funny because that is exactly what you can do to print a line of hashtags. You can print a string times 80. Now, I told you couldn't do math, but it's not entirely true. You can do times because all it says is do this 80 times. So I'm a bit of a liar, but for a good reason. So if I print this, okay, I have a print statement or print argument or print function here with 3 arguments. Now we know what this does, right? This prints hashtag times 9, and then there's a comma, and then there's something, and then I'm printing hashtag times 9. Now we know that each time I have a comma here in a regular print function, it does what? What does it print when there's a comma? A space, right? So I have 9 hashtags and a space, 10 characters. And then at the end I have a space and 9 hashtags. What do you think the second argument does? It centers it in a row of 60. So it'll take 60 grid spaces. It'll take this string and it will do its very best to put that right in the middle. Now, if you have like an even number of spaces and you have an odd number of characters, it will be shifted one grid space over because there's nothing you can really do about that. You can't force an odd into an even and have it be right in the middle. But in this case, it prints 9 hashtags, a space, and then a group of 60 blank spaces with Bill's calculator in the middle, and then 9 more. What does this one do? What does it print? So again, we have 3 arguments, right? First argument, second argument, third argument. So what does this print? So this is a space here. Yeah, 2 hashtags, 74 spaces, 2 hashtags. The only thing we forgot, if you're doing the math there, that comes up to 78 because we have to account for the 2 spaces with the commas. Yep. So, just real quick, let's take a look at some of these. I'm just going to copy and paste them into this. And just for the record, Python does not like smart quotes. That's why it's giving me this error here, because smart quotes are the enemy of all programming. You know that smart quotes, when they're, you can see how they're turned in like that. Smart quotes aren't actually 2 different characters, you know. They are just abominations of what the actual quote is, which is a single character. There's no difference between a open quote and a closed quote other than their position. They're not like parentheses where there's a clear difference between the 2. Smart quotes are just made up things. Okay, so there are the 3 things. And normally, when my font isn't this large, you can see the whole horizontal line. But for the purpose of you being able to actually see what I have here on the board, I have to keep my font super huge. But 80. How do you suppose we came upon the number 80? Like, why not 200 so you could put more stuff on the screen? Where do you think 80 came from? I'll give you a hint. What year do you think 80 came from? Like 1968, guys. Because that's how many characters a standard computer screen could show horizontally in the year Python was invented. And as modern as we are, we do like our relics, don't we? So there's a lot you can do here. And you can even print, like if I wanted to print some kind of interesting pattern, you can get really creative, and that's absolutely fine. I mean, you can do all kinds of things. And if you are good enough with your ASCII art, you can be really creative. And I'm going to leave that to you. But what I will say is, when we start using our programming, we start developing assignments and things,